I was a youngin', my mom, sister, and I used to make the rounds to put flowers on the family graves with my grandma Edith. She always called the holiday Decoration Day. That name apparently originated in 1868 because people began decorating the graves of Civil War soldiers with flowers. After World War I, the observance expanded to honor Americans who died in all wars, and the name Memorial Day became more commonly used. When Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act in 1968, it took effect in 1971. The federal government formally recognized the holiday as Memorial Day and moved it to the last Monday in May. When you think about it, that little historical transition actually fits quite nicely as we share in communion this morning. Decoration Day focused on decorating graves. Memorial Day focused on remembering sacrifice. And communion does both spiritually. It remembers Christ's sacrifice and honors the hope that we have because of the sacrifice. Thinking back, I don't remember minding or complaining about our annual ritual. A lot of that probably had to do with the fact that it was something Grandma wanted to do, and she was very special to me. Not only that, but Decoration Day had such an uplifting sound to it. Remembrance is sacred, and something God takes very seriously. I would call it holy. Throughout Scripture, we are constantly told, remember. Remember what God has done. Remember His faithfulness. Remember His sacrifice. Remember who you belong to. That's exactly what communion is. Jesus gave us this right as a holy act of remembrance. In Luke 22:19, Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. And not merely as a ritual, not just because we've always done it. Two things we need to be on our guard against, but because we are forgetful people. We forget how much we've been forgiven. We forget how deeply we're loved. We forget the cost of grace. Both Memorial Day and Communion remind us that blood was the price of things very precious to us. Most notably, our freedom with Memorial Day and then salvation with Communion. The good news is that Jesus' sacrificial death also includes the promise of resurrection and life. And so Jesus gave us the bread and the cup, tangible reminders that we can hold in our hands, a memorial to the Savior of the entire world. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 11:26, for whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until He comes. Now notice that phrase, you proclaim. We typically think of communion as quiet and personal, and so it is. But that verse also reminds us it is not altogether passive. It declares something. Every time we take the bread and cup, we are declaring Jesus gave His body for us. Jesus shed His blood for us. Jesus defeated sin and death for us. Jesus willingly laid down His life, not because we earned it, not because we deserved it, but because He loves us. When He said, do this in remembrance of me, He wasn't asking us to simply remember facts, that He died and rose again, but He was inviting us to remember Him personally, to remember His mercy when we fail, His patience when we stumble, His grace when we feel unworthy, His presence even in our grief and struggles. So today, as we take communion on this Memorial Day weekend, this old Decoration Day weekend, maybe we can think of this table
crooked stick. That was one that my dad used to tell me every now and again, and more and more, you definitely see where it is true. God can strike a perfectly straight blow with an awfully crooked stick. As we walk through the book of Proverbs, we've seen some of the lessons that the wisdom of God passed on through the generations of his people are portrayed over and over again. And the last week or so, we've been looking at some of those main themes when it comes to the book of Proverbs. And we're going to trace three main themes. We talked last week about wisdom walking with the poor in spirit, or the least of these. We see how that relates and falls into what Jesus teaches on later on. This morning, what I want us to look through is the second of those key themes throughout the book of Proverbs. And that is this: wisdom walks in purity of heart and actions. Wisdom walks in purity of heart and actions. And let me remind you that God can strike a perfectly straight blow with an awfully crooked stick. And it amazes me the type of person that God calls to display this wisdom and to pass along this wisdom to his people and preserve his wisdom for the people of God. Proverbs is often attributed to the character of Solomon. And if we want to talk about this idea of purity of heart and of actions, Solomon may not be the character that you expected to talk about this wisdom. I want to remind you the stories that we get of who Solomon is. Solomon does start out this character who asks God for wisdom. We talked about that the very first week that we opened up the book of Proverbs, the very first week into this month. When Solomon says, hey God, I want wisdom. I could ask for all these other things, but I want wisdom. And so God is going to bless him with all these different things in the course of the way that he is blessing him with wisdom. But as Solomon's story progresses, we see some of the character flaws that he has. Some of the ways that this is an awfully crooked stick. If you open your Bibles up to 1 Kings chapter 11, we get introduced to how Solomon is starting to display some of the very characteristics that God had said specifically of his people. Hey, watch out. Watch out if your king starts doing X, Y, Z. And Solomon starts doing Z, X, and Y very, very quickly. Solomon, as he takes reign, here's how he rules. Here's how he gains control. Here's how he politically operates. All right? In 1 Kings chapter 11, I want to introduce you to verses 1 through 4. King Solomon loved many foreign women. In addition to Pharaoh's daughters, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonite, Hittite women. From the nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them. And they must not intermarry with you, because they will turn your heart away to follow their gods. To these women, Solomon was deeply attached in love. He had 700 wives who were princesses, and 300 who were concubines. And they turned his heart away. When Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away to follow other gods. And he was not wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his God as his father David has been. God can strike a perfectly straight blow with an awfully crooked stick. Over and over and over again. The book of Proverbs and the wisdom of God's people, the wisdom that God passes down through his people, it is going to call the followers of God and the followers eventually of Christ to a way of living in purity. purity to God's ways, to his ethic, for how we use our bodies and how we interact with others' bodies. When God talks about purity, be careful with what we connect ourselves with. And there is a connection that happens anytime that intimacy is involved. And for Solomon, over and over again, he chose that the way that he was going to operate was going to be intimacy, but not with God. Not with God. Instead, Solomon was going to be intimately connected with the world. Wisdom does not walk in this way. Wisdom walks in purity of heart and in actions. I want us to look again, take a survey once again of Proverbs' voice in this. Wisdom's voice as we walk with Proverbs. So flip on over to Proverbs. We're going to do another little sword drill this morning and walk through all these different passages that talk about this idea of wisdom and purity in heart and in actions. Alright? We're going to see over and over the way that God calls his people to a different level of purity. In chapter 2, Proverbs chapter 2, verse 10 and 11. Here's where Solomon goes. As he's walking through and balancing between these two ideas of you can either walk and go for Lady Wisdom or Lady Folly. Here's what he says. He says, for wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will delight you. Discretion will watch over you, and understanding will guard you. We're going to see this idea of what it is that enters into your heart of being a key thing when talking about purity throughout this discussion. Just a couple of verses later down in verse 16 and 17, still in chapter 2, as he's talking about this idea of wisdom, he says, it will rescue you from a forbidden woman, from a wayward woman, with her flattering talk. When it talks about that, it talks kind of like a promiscuous woman in this time. It says it will keep you from a forbidden woman, from a wayward woman with her flattering talk, who abandons the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. What Proverbs tells us to do then in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, which is one of the more popular and well-known Proverbs, is this. He says, therefore, guard your heart above all else, for it is the source of life. This purity is going to be found in the heart. It's going to bleed out through the rest of how we operate. Continuing on down in chapter 5, verses 3 through 8, here's the wisdom that those of Solomon pass on. Though the lips of the forbidden women drip honey, and her words are smoother than oil, in the end she is as bitter as wormwood, and as sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps head straight for Sheol. She doesn't consider the path of life. She doesn't know that her ways are unstable. And he encourages. So now, sons, listen to me. Don't turn away from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her. Don't go near the door of her house. It's going to go on to say, if you go near the door of her house, you're going to fall in. Then flip down to chapter 5, verses 15 through 18. And here's Solomon's answer to that. Drink water from your own cistern. He's using some imagery here, by the way. Drink water from your own cistern. Water flowing from your own well. Should your springs flow in the streets? Streams in the public squares? They should be for you alone. Not for you to share with strangers. Let your fountain be blessed and take pleasure in the wife of your youth. He's going to say, later on in verse 20, why, my son, would you lose yourself with a forbidden woman or embrace a wayward woman? For a man's ways are before the Lord's eyes, and he considers all his paths. Chapter 6, verses 25 through 29 say, don't lust in your heart for her beauty, or let her captivate you with her eyelashes. For a prostitute's fee is only a loaf of bread, but the wife of another man goes after a precious life. Can a man embrace fire and his clothes not be burned? Can a man walk on burning coals without scorching his feet? So is the one who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. Continuing on in chapter 6, verse 32, says, the one who commits adultery lacks sense. Whoever does so destroys himself. Very next chapter, in chapter 7, verses 4 and 5, says, say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your relative. She will keep you from a forbidden woman, a wayward woman with her flattering talk. Chapter 7, verses 25 through 27 says, don't let your heart turn aside to her ways. Don't stray onto her paths, for she has brought many down to death, and her victims are countless. Her house is the road to Sheol, descending to the chambers of death. And then all the way on in chapter 23, the imagery continues, but I want to just look at this one in chapter 23, verses 26 and 27. Here's where he goes. He says, my son, give me your heart, and let your eyes observe my ways. For prostitute is a deep pit, and a wayward woman is a narrow road. Over and over, the book of Proverbs encourages the people of God to walk in a way that lives out purity in both heart and actions. And this call isn't just something to set the people apart, but it's for the people to actually observe what the purpose of that intimacy is in life. As we live in the culture that we do, the statistics are sad of the call for God's people to stand up and embrace purity. Embrace purity in a way that says we will honor what God has set forth and what God has made. We will walk in a way that sets the standard for what it looks like. And we do so because of the witness that we have, and the ways that we've seen this idea of impurity and indulgence. Just degrade lives. One of the things that the Proverbs reiterates over and over and over again is the cost. The cost of impurity. The cost of just going with the way that the world does it. I think that Solomon recognized that. Like I said, he's someone who doesn't quite live this out. 700 wives, 300 concubines. We could probably look at him and say, hey bud, I don't know for sure if you're the one to give these verses. But boy, that brings up the beauty of what God can do in somebody's life, doesn't it? Solomon had firsthand experience with the cost. The cost of allowing your heart to be filled with something that it shouldn't be. If you look at his immediate line, Solomon had a brother. You go back just before Solomon was born, and the way that his mom and dad got together was not the way that God designed it to be. God used it? Yes, absolutely. Was it the way that God designed it to be? Absolutely not. David one day tells us when, in the springtime, when the kings were to go off to war, David was in his palace. And he was up on the roof. And 2 Samuel 11 gives us the account of what happened there as David stood on the roof and looked over and saw Bathsheba washing herself. And what started as just viewing something that was distant began a cascade of events that turned into him saying, hey, I want her to be mine. I don't care that she's another man's wife. I don't care that she's my best friend's wife. And David pursues Bathsheba. And after an affair, a child is conceived, a husband is murdered, a baby is born and dies. It's a sad, sad story that precedes Solomon's. And Solomon's mom and Solomon's dad have to come face to face with the cost of what this impurity brings. It wouldn't be the last time that Solomon's dad, David, had to deal with this. 2 Samuel 13 tells the story of Tamar and Absalom, in a wretched time of Israel's history. And it's sad and it's hurtful, but it's the reality of what happens when people are overcome with their desires, and what looks good in their own eyes, and what they're willing to take. We won't account that full story just because we recognize just the hurt that can come in stories like that. The Bible doesn't ignore them, and I don't think we should either. But sometimes, as we walk in wisdom, we want to take some time to allow. If you need to see the cost of that, go read the story in 2 Samuel 13. In 2 Samuel 15, the way that Absalom tries to take over the kingdom from his father David, from Solomon's father David, is to take his wife and his concubines for himself. You go earlier in their family history, from the very beginning, Abram and Hagar experienced the consequences of what not participating in marriage God's way will lead to. What infidelity and even excused promiscuity can bring. Sarah gives her slave to Abraham. And the result is heartache, heartbreak, family division that spans generations and still felt today. Solomon writes about the consequences that he's seen, that he's felt, that's been told in his family history. And here's the thing, his story probably isn't too much different than most. Unfortunately, this world is littered with stories of what happens when the bonds and the covenants of marriage, of faithfulness, of purity are broken. The age of exposure is getting younger and younger. For young kids to be exposed to pervasive usage of what goes on the internet and in movies is exploding. The moments of divorce because of infidelity happen all the time. Allowing dating to include trying one another out to see about your compatibility, it just becomes commonplace in the world. I remember sitting in a classroom as we had our older adults ministry course, and we had someone from a Christian retirement home that came and spoke to us about ministering to older adults. And one of the surprising realities that there still need to be conversations about staying faithful to your wife, faithful to your husband, faithful to your marriage, even into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and above. It's not a new problem. It's not a young person's problem. It's not just an our time, our place problem. It's one that spans generations. And so for the wisdom of God's people to walk in purity of heart and action, it's a real call that spans generations and that doesn't stop in the Old Testament or in the New. It continues on today. Honor. The confines and the definition of marriage that God gives. Guard your heart above all else, for everything you do flows from it. What you watch, what you take in, what you listen to will come out. In the way that you view others, as property instead of people. In the way that you treat others, as disposable. In the way that you value your marriage and the beauty of that covenant with another that God has given you. God designed marriage to be between one man and one woman for life. Period. End of sentence. And the call of God's people is not to stand out in that way just to be some cool example. Not to just provide stark contrast, although it will, but to honor the Creator who made us, who formed us, who gave us value, and gave us one another as a reflection of the covenant that He lives with us. And here's the thing. God calls us to walk in purity, both heart and actions. We don't need either one of those out. And we take it seriously. But we can't end this conversation, especially in the day and age that we all live in, without recognizing that God can strike perfectly straight blow with an off-road stick. Not only can God transform somebody who has messed up in all of these ways and use them to preserve the wisdom of God's people throughout the ages, God can take a people and a person steeped in the ways that the world says is status quo, people who have fallen and messed up. And trust me, if you messed up in either any of these ways, if your heart has not been defined by purity, if your actions have been far from squeaky clean, you're not alone. It's not an excuse, but it's a comfort. That God can transform, He can redeem, and He can restore. In beautiful, beautiful ways. Hey, the cross of Jesus Christ life that he lives and the fact that that grave is empty reminds us that we have life on the other side of our mistakes. That we have purity on the other side of our mistakes. That we have restoration when things were once broken. And so, if in your life there is anything impure, anything unholy, anything that is not honoring to God, that's what he calls you to. It's not to earn back your salvation. It's not to show God how righteous you are and how deserving you are of what he's going to do. He's already washed and made you clean. If you are in him, behold, the old is gone and the new has come. But then we respond. We allow God to transform us by the renewing of our minds. God is the one who can do the heart transplant surgery that we all need. From stone to flesh. From defiled to pure. And in this time, in this moment, what we want to do is we're going to sing some more songs. We're going to lift this up to the Lord. But what we're going to do is we're going to offer God. Here's my heart. Here's my heart, Lord. And if you need to take that time to sing and to offer it up with your words, I invite you into that. If you need to take this time and you need to say, hey, here's my heart, Lord, and you need to spend that silent but crying out to God in your heart, and in a time of confession, in a time of saying, hey, from this moment on, I want to commit to purity. I invite you to do that. If you want to talk to somebody, or you want to say, hey, I have some ways that I need to talk and to confess, find somebody around you. And here's the thing, during these times of invitation, you don't have to wait. Sometimes we can get a call on Tuesday or Wednesday saying, hey, that thing that we talked about back then, God is a God who can transform you. You have a community of brothers and sisters. Yes, this is a guy and a girl issue in sin. You have a community of brothers and sisters that can walk beside you, that can love you, that can care for you, that won't throw stones, but will pray together. Do it today. Let's cry out to God together. Let's offer God all that we are. So I'm going to pray, and the team's going to come up, and we're going to sing. Just invite you into this time of dedicating our hearts and our minds to the Lord and offering him our praise, our worship, and our confession. Lord, we thank you for who you are. And God, we need you. We need you, we need you, we need you. Lord, you call us to purity of heart and action, and we know the sin of staying in our world, in our own lives. So God, to you we offer up our hearts. God, to you we ask through your Son Jesus to wash us and make us clean, to set us on the path of purity. Lord, like David prayed, create in me a new heart, God. Create a right spirit in me. Cast me not away from your presence, but restore the right spirit within me. And God, that is our prayer. We need it in our world today. So God, we offer this time to you. So in Jesus' name we pray.